Hi, my name is Rachel Velez, and the purpose of this video is to explain and evaluate my journey through the course ENC 1101. I will be reviewing what I have learned throughout the semester and the works I have created within the course. By looking back at my own works and the course readings, I have been able to reflect upon how I've achieved the goals of ENC 1101, as well as my own personal goals through the writing choices I have made. The two major goals of ENC 1101 were to understand our own writing process and the writing processes of others, as well as to interpret the course text and themes in order to understand how they affect literacy. In order to evaluate the text, we had to understand themes like sponsors, genre, rhetorical situations, and discourses. We also created works that had us evaluate our own writing process in order to accomplish the goals of ENC 1101. In addition to the goals of ENC 1101, I had two personal goals myself. My first goal was to improve my editing skills in order to enhance the structure of my writing. My second goal was to make better use of the outside text within my writing. As I began the course ENC 1101, I made sure to keep these goals in mind. There were many aspects of this course that helped me to gain an understanding of the writing process. One of the first things that exposed me to understanding the writing process was the literacy and identity narrative we first wrote. After reading a few texts that touched on the idea of literacy sponsors and discourse communities, I began to learn more about my own literacy and writing process. In the first essay, I evaluated the people and experiences that have affected my literacy. Through this process, I found the main sponsors of my literacy were my parents, and they had the largest impact on why I write the way I do. The writer profile I wrote about Mr. Velez and his discourse community was the piece that helped me to understand the writing processes of others. As I explored his discourse speech writing community, I was exposed to the idea of presentation and practice as part of the writing process within a speech community. Through my interview with Mr. Velez, I also gained insight into his planning, writing, and revising process. This evaluation gave me an understanding of how others write and how their writing processes differ from my own. In order to interpret the course readings and their themes, the responses we created to each article and the summary and critique practice were key in aiding in my understanding. After reading both Brandt and Grant-Davies articles that refer to sponsors and rhetorical situations, these responses helped me to break down the complex topics and relate them to my own writing. As we look at the themes in Brandt, Grant-Davie, and Birkenkotter's articles in the summary and critique practice, our groups were able to find the relationships between each text. Through this critique practice, I saw that sponsorship related to rhetorical situations because each sponsor puts the writer in a new rhetorical situation, which in turn influences their writing process. I also found that Birkenkotter's observation that environment influences how Murray wrote directly related to Grant-Davies' rhetorical situations, because an environment presents its own situation which determines how a writer will write. When it came to my first personal goal of improving my editing to create better structure in my writing, the peer review proved to be instrumental in this process. Having my peers, professor, and the Writing Center give me critiques about my work made my editing skills 100% stronger. I really started to notice the change in my editing during my article review. After conducting my rough draft, I knew my essay lacked structure and was missing key aspects of review. After getting some advice from my peers, I learned that the summary of my article review was too long and that my review needed to include more positive and negative critique of the article. After shortening the summary and adding more critique, my article review started to become more structured. I then went to meet with my professor, which was the turning point in my editing process of my article review. After the meeting with my professor, I learned that although I had each element of review, my connections to other texts lacked effectiveness. After this meeting, I began to look at my paper from a more outside perspective when editing to make sure that the connections I was making were strong enough that someone who had never read the works could still understand what I was saying. Editing in this way helped me to strengthen my connections in order to make the structure of my article effective. I also learned to try and come up with an outline before I write in order to structure my topics, so that I can give detail within each topic while still keeping focus. I used this process before starting the script, which has really helped me to keep structure of my ideas within the script. My other personal goal was to implement the course readings effectively within my writing. The homework responses we completed for each article were the first thing to help me include these readings in my own writing. For each course reading, we were asked to give a response to the topics that could relate to our own writing process. In my response to Brandt's article, I was able to break down the idea of a sponsor of literacy as someone who influences how an individual learns to read and write. This proved to be an effective part of incorporating the readings into my literacy and identity narrative, because my response to Brandt's article already contained the relationship of a sponsor to my own life. In my homework response to Brandt, I discussed how my parents have been the sponsors of my literacy and used this idea as the thesis of my literacy and identity narrative. The ENC 1101 course has also introduced me to the term multimodal. In the creation of the writer profile, I learned that a multimodal aspect of writing was a way of presenting a work which could include pictures, objects, or other forms of creative structure. When tasked with creating a video, it is impossible to avoid using multimodal aspects. In order to make this reflection video, I have incorporated pictures, screenshots of my work, and videos of myself. Each of these aspects are a multimodal component of my reflection video used to enhance the effectiveness of my script. Overall, ENC 1101 has taught me to interpret college-level texts and incorporate their themes into my writing. I also improved my own editing skills as well as gained an understanding of the writing process. Looking at my own writing as a process has helped me to improve the way I organize and compose different works. My achievement of completing the course and personal goals has put me one step closer to the path I am striving to take.